What brought me to Florida was parents' divorce. But the reason I've stayed here is because it's a beautiful place and it's comfortable, and I feel like there's way more opportunity here than there would be where I came from.
I'll put it this way. I think a lot of actors believe that they need to be in a very big market in order to be successful, in order to find opportunities. So they all kind of flocked to Los Angeles and New York, and I was one of them. I did the same thing. I went out to Los Angeles, lived a couple of years out there. But what I found was that I began to feel kind of like I was suffocating. Every audition I was fighting tooth and nail for something as simple as, like a student film. And it was just an absolute battle to get tape from them. And it got to a point where I felt like I was drowning in a sea of people that looked exactly like me. So I had a moment where I kind of asked myself, where are these people coming from? Because if they're coming out here, they're leaving opportunities back where they're coming from. And I had already experienced some filmmakers in Florida from my short time going to school out here. So I decided I was going to come back, and that's what I did.
The biggest thing that brought me to Florida for film is the fact that I found a really nice school here that is pretty much a school that I've wanted to be at, kind of a small school, but it has been doing really well within kind of teaching me how to be a filmmaker. And what I've learned from being here is that Florida is a great place to start a career as a filmmaker.
After coming back, I developed these awesome working relationships with some very talented filmmakers and other actors out this way. And since then, in a matter of about 2.5 years, I've built a pretty solid demo reel, gotten, a headshot that I'm extremely happy with, very proud of. And I'm finally reaching a point where people are calling me for work, which is kind of a dream come true when you're an artist looking to keep the lights on.
Well, filming in Florida, while it is relatively simple with locations, the thing that I have the hardest part with is the funding. There's not always an easy way to find the money.
Getting others to go along with whatever idea you have. In my school, we have all sorts of different minds, and not everyone's going to agree to the same thing.
One, the tax incentives here make it very hard for independent filmmakers on lower budgets to come in and film here. It also makes it hard for larger budget films to come in here because the incentives run out so fast, which they have now at this current date. We basically have no film incentives left in Florida. Some of the challenges for me as an independent filmmaker with what the industry would consider lower budgets is finding ways to utilize the state we have in the smaller incentives per counties, and also finding talent, because what I'm finding more and more that the talent at the level we're looking to cast has left the state to go to other places that have more work and bigger film incentives. So getting them to come back here for lower budget films is, especially when there's less incentives to offer them to do that, is a much harder obstacle.
It's incredibly expensive to film a project in general. You gotta worry about, you can cut corners, but for the most part, you have to worry about, if your location, sometimes your location requires money, your wardrobe requires money. There's some actors and actresses that will not work without being paid. Depends on how experienced they are, I've found, and how generous they are. Sound people, you got to pay some of your crew unless you're really tight with them. There's a lot of crew that I don't pay because I have worked with them constantly. I help them out and they help me out. But money is a big issue, and scheduling is a big issue.
Teaching at the intro level, let's say, introductory level. I've got some students that come out of high school with wonderful talents, skills, and a little bit of experience. I have other students that are afraid of computers and aren't photographers, but they're interested. So when I put those two people together, I find that I kind of have to deconstruct the myth that is the cinematic paradox. We've got students that have seen a lot of movies, and it looks like it just happens. So we often have to take apart the components, the audio, the video, the organization, planning, the stages of production, and address them individually to dispel the myth that film is such a lie. We're not telling anyone the truth. It's like the magic. The magic's not here. It's in the hand you don't see. So all the implication power of film, what's outside the frame as well, are a lot of the ingredients that are key to cracking the nut that is the student that may be new to the industry or the medium.
Well, it has had its ups and downs. There was a time when Florida was touted as the Hollywood of the South. We had some pretty significant incentives for productions to come here and temporarily do their thing, which would mean a lot of students would get help. They would be tapped for help, production assistants and the like. That isn't as strong as it used to be, but what has gained strength are our institutions. Because of that past relationship with incentive organizations like the Sarasota Film Commission, classes have grown up, not only at SCF, but obviously at Ringling, at New College, in high schools. Mass communications has always been part of this too, and as film and mass comm have come together under the digital umbrella, we're finding that we've got a lot of brothers and sisters out there in media that can be called filmmakers because they're working with the moving image. So I would say it is a good place.
Some of the benefits of filming in Florida is you get to see the most beautiful locations in the world. You have hand-picked beaches all around here that you can get your fantasy films done, your romantic films, even some action films if you want to do a kick-ass scene on the beach. And then another benefit of it is that you get to work with some really amazing people.
The locations that you can get, maybe not very mountainous, but you get locations like natural springs, you get very tropical beach areas to film at. I love to swim, so those locations are my primary focus in all my shows, is I show something from anything that has to do with water and that particular aspect.
Especially Sarasota is kind of brought up on the arts, if you think about it. Like, our foundations are circus arts, performance arts. So there's a lot of imagination, a lot of talent, and a lot of creativity here. And to kind of enhance that, we also have all this beautiful imagery all around. You got gorgeous beaches and all these Spanish architectures to work with.
I think the people that you find here are just great people to work with. We have a lot of actors, especially from the kind of the theater background, that are really interested in getting within the film world. And working with those people, and not only that, but working with people who are also filmmakers and are just eager to help you out in any sort of project that you may be doing, and they put the effort in, and they're equally passionate about filmmaking as you are.
I would say at the moment, outside of the business aspect of it, would be just our state's versatility, right? So we have a climate that you can film in pretty much all year round.
Scenery, hands down, it's got to be the scenery. Put it this way, if we live in Florida, we live where other people choose to vacation. So if they're going to Florida to escape, and film is a form of escapism, why wouldn't you want to film in Florida and capture that essence and give that escapism even more so to people through the beauty of film?
Basically, how film incentives work in Florida is it's a tax-based system where they take taxpayer money, put it aside into a film fund that is an incentive to bring large films here, right? So through the last 5 years, we've had about $300 million put aside for feature films that meet certain criteria to bring them in, and we've used that very quickly. It's gone now because, as you know, films can range from anywhere from 5 million to 100 million. So you can imagine you get a couple big films here and that money is gone. It's used up.
I think it's unfortunate. If you look at Florida in general, as I was talking about with the locations, there's so much. They canceled a TV show I used to watch on Netflix, I think in part for that reason, for tax incentives. But there's so much rich culture here. There's just beautiful locations, and I think that more productions would come here. I mean, you got productions like Live by Night by Ben Affleck. the whole movie's about Ybor City, and he shot it in Georgia because, no tax incentives. So I think that if we were to bring, those back and provide more artistic value for other directors and producers, this place could flourish. There'd be so much money here. And it really isn't even about the money also. It's just, artistically, there's so much visually you can film here.
So basically how that incentive works is that you get 30 cents for every dollar back. So if you spend $1, you can get 30 cents back on that dollar if it follows all the criteria set forth by the incentive. And that's a big part of bringing those films into Florida that is now gone, so we have no films in Florida now. No large films or productions in Florida now. So at the moment, I've done 3 successful feature films in Florida as of now. We're in pre-production for my 4th, and unfortunately, we're getting to the point that we've utilized every resource we can here in Florida, and we're starting to look to move to another state and bring all of our talent with us, and that's an unfortunate thing because we love Florida, and I really, really, really want to continue supporting the state and continue supporting my city by staying here and filming, but it's just becoming to a point where it just doesn't make business sense to do that anymore.
With filming, I have all of my resources mostly here, so I foresee myself staying here for a very long time. I do like to travel, and so going to places like LA and New York to do more networking and see other people, get things going on, that's definitely something that I see in my future, but I definitely want to stay home-based here in Florida for a very long time.
I see myself staying in Florida primarily for the film work for pretty much as long as I can. I'd like to put down some roots here because I don't mind traveling. In fact, I enjoy traveling, so there's quite a few things that I'm just kind of in love with about the area that make me want to stay here. As I mentioned before, my phone rings for work. I know who to contact when I'm looking for work, so I can find it typically a little bit easier than it was in, say, Los Angeles. But I'll stay here as long as I can until I get those calls where I have to, live somewhere like Los Angeles or New York.
I would like to have what I'd refer to as a home base here, somewhere I can always come back to. But also, there's just so many contacts I've made here that I've worked with on different films that I would like to continue working with. So that'll keep me here for quite a few years, at least 2 or 3 more.
Here in Florida, a lot of things are great here in our filming scene. We have great film communities. Unfortunately, when we start getting into bigger and bigger projects, there's not as many people to choose from around here. So it'd be great to have even more variety in crew members. There's a lot of actors. There's not a whole lot of people who are very passionate about wardrobe or passionate about craft services, passionate about being a grip. And so the more specialized positions that we can keep here in Florida would make filming all the time around here, and it'd be a very thriving community.
What I'd like to see, and this goes really for any market, not just Florida, I think it's just people, but I'd like people to be more honest with each other. I think we have a tendency to kind of stroke each other's egos in a sense, kind of pat on the back, yes, great job, and that's fine. But I think constructive criticism can go a long way, and I think if you really truly care about somebody, you will offer a very honest opinion about their work and not just tell them what they want to hear, because as much as we want to guard someone's feelings, we're also holding them back from achieving even more. I know that when I receive criticism, I'm that much more motivated to get better, to really hone in on my craft and develop that skill. I think it's vital for people to be honest with one another, not in a way of coming from a place of like pretentious, I know more than you kind of thing, but just be honest. This is what I thought about it, this is what I felt. And I think we have a bit of a problem with falling into a comfortable zone where we love getting that local praise, and so we start doing things over and over specifically for that local praise, but we reach a comfortable level that we don't try and push anymore as an artist. We don't try to expand, and I think that kills artistry.
What motivates me to keep making films is I just have this yearning for creation and a passion for storytelling. And I feel like there's so many stories that have yet to be told. And filmmaking is a very beautiful medium for expressing said stories. It can reach out to people in a way that reading a book necessarily couldn't. Not to say there's anything wrong with reading a book. I love reading books. I think it's the most basic form of storytelling. But film, you can reach people a little deeper, I feel.
I can't see myself doing anything else. Like, you know, right now I'm waiting tables. You know, it's pretty much every acting story you heard from somebody is they're waiting tables before they got their big break.
There's always a story that comes around. Walking around an airport, seeing a person that can trigger a story from my past, a story from someone else's past. Telling stories in a film medium is very powerful, and so I want to continue doing that more and more.
What motivated me to become a teacher of film production, Del Jacobs, students, and the performance element, because I get to put on a show multiple times a week. Not that the class is about me, but I treat the whole semester as a movie with many movies within. I treat every class like a movie with many scenes within, a lot of things to coordinate. I find that the variables therein, wonderful. Throw the students in there, double wonderful, because I never quite know how it's going to come together, and that keeps me interested.
Well, currently the way that I find work is mostly from word of mouth or being referred by another person. There's also several sites that you can go to find work. As far as Bouncy Baxter Media, that is a company thing that I have to do, so I have to go find the work by networking with people, talking to them about what our projects are, what services we provide, and how we can do that for them.
Whew, wow. Yes, if you want to do commercial work all the time. There's plenty of commercial work to go around. Especially on the Miami side, there's tons of it. If you're looking for feature film work, no. Production work for shows or films, very, very little of that, and definitely not enough to go around unless you're a professional extra, which is nothing wrong with that. That's amazing. I know people that have a very good living as a professional extra, but I think as an actor, you're always looking to get past that to the next level and really stand out. So the answer is yes and no, depending on what route you want to go and how hard you want to struggle to get it.
I wouldn't know if it provides enough because I don't normally work on paid gigs, but I think finding the work is actually not as hard as a lot of people would think. It's just more the fact that if the individual is more able and open to work on smaller independent kind of films, because that's the kind of films that I usually see. If they're hiring for crew, those are the kind of films that are trying to find people to hire for their projects.
I think anyone in Florida without a film degree can make a living in the state. A film production degree is worth what you do with it. So if your degree, and degrees have expiration dates, if your degree allows you to enter the workforce due to the evidence in hand in the form of the degree to get that foot in the door, great. But it seems like as soon as you hit the ground running, the degree kind of changes shape a bit. So I like to say, if you've got 20 grand burning a hole in your pocket and you want to throw it at a school, it's because you want that networking, access to resources, and so on and so forth. Or you want to go on to get your master's degree for other reasons. Perhaps you want to teach. Perhaps you want to protect your future a little bit. If you want to get your doctorate, that's wonderful. That gets into a new realm. But if you've got the wherewithal, you can put those resources right to work. It's probably a little riskier in terms of turnaround, but yeah, if you have it, go get it. Sometimes school's a waste of time. Sometimes school really makes your time worth it. Depends where you're at and what you want. What can a school like SCF or film schools in general do to help students more? On one level, follow the train of where education is going. It seems that the future of education is less about the past in terms of the way curriculums, let's just say book, test, quiz oriented. I think guiding students to resources across the board, across disciplines, is probably our best bet for the future. No longer are students interested, as if they were, listening to someone talk for 2 hours. They want breakup, they want action, they want to be involved, hands-on, It's a lot easier to get someone engaged and have them learn at different levels than it is to just hope they did the reading and test them accordingly. So yeah, resources. Point them to electronic resources, organizational resources, elements out there that can help them get involved. I really think that that's the future of education. We're less of the ones that are handing the knowledge over. We're more the entity that opens the gateway to access.
One of the ongoing challenges in a production track is equipment. I say that first with the eye toward stocking your own equipment room, which is what we do here at SCF. But I also want to mitigate it with the comment that a lot of students have their own equipment. You can make a movie on an iPhone. In fact, sometimes if you think it's limiting, those limitations become an urge to create. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the films that have been shot wholly on iPhones. But I think it's still important for a so-called film school to always have a room where there is hardware that students can come to, hold, and say, yeah, I like this, or I think I need something like this. And they may go out and buy their own, but we need to have that. And we do. From the very beginning, that's how this course was built.
I keep students motivated, hopefully, by reflecting their own energy and perhaps bringing some of my energy to the table. So I think it's a give and take. They fire me up and I fire them up. I think it works nicely that way, because every day isn't energy. Sometimes we're tired, we're bogged down. We might be in the middle of a production and be downright depressed, not sure how it's going. The stakes are high, we got a budget that we need to make good on, and sometimes the reflection of energy is a wonderful thing, just to keep everybody feeling good about it. I know at many levels, dailies. If your producer doesn't know how things are going or has doubts, show them some good-looking dailies. They'll probably get right back on the train in terms of their faith in the project and who's helming it. I find that works nicely with students as well. Feedback, constructive feedback, but certainly complimentary feedback. There was a student, a couple of years ago, that didn't realize he had some very natural talents as a camera operator, really good eye. And I didn't realize that this was the case. He told me at some point after a daily session, he said, you know what? I never realized I had that at my fingertips, that talent, until you pointed out that I had some natural abilities that I should massage. So that's a nice example of just getting the energy up in places where we didn't realize it was possible.
This program was rebuilt by the use of one camera and one student and myself. And I'll tell you very briefly what happened. This was back in the early 90s, and a student named Rob Caragiulo of the restaurant family was one of my production students, and he and I teamed up to make a video for a church that wanted to buy a new organ. It was a campaign video. They wanted to show it to people so that they would be able to contribute to buy a new organ. And I told the pastor, I said, but we don't have a camera. I said, if you buy a camera, and this camera would have been a Super VHS camera, it was that long ago. If you buy a camera for us, $1,500, we'll do your video. And so Rob and I worked on that. We edited it with equipment that we had that was rather antiquated. And that was the first piece of equipment that we ever owned, and it was bartered. And when the college knew that there was that kind of interest and desire from a students actually, because there was a crew, they started funding the program.
Basically, for example, the Burnt Bridge, that was probably one of the most expensive projects I've ever worked on. It was a lot of travel because most of my crew members were in Sarasota, and I currently am in the Tampa area. So driving to and from costs a lot of money, and then, you know, obviously I want to compensate with lunches and stuff like that for my actors and anything like that.
One of the challenges of bringing our own projects into production is mostly finding the resources and finding the money. And so once you have one or the other, it makes things a little bit easier. A lot of times we have to go by the seat of our pants and try to make things work even with very little money or very little resources. But it also hones your skills and makes you a better filmmaker.
A lot of it is money. Especially, you can ask anybody that's an independent filmmaker here, especially in Florida. A lot of us are doing it straightly out of our own pockets. So, you know, we all have bills, rent, you know, car payments, car insurance, all that kind of stuff. So it's really tough self-funding these projects. I haven't done anything in the particular lines of fundraisers or any of those Indiegogo or Patreon type of things. So I'm just basically saving up as much money as I can and then saving enough to have money for props, equipment, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I've had a lot of people that have worked on my productions that have brought their own equipment, helps me out.
I fund my projects on my own personal salary, and Bouncy Boxer Media actually has been getting more and more services going, so we're having a cash flow coming through. So between my personal funding and Bouncy, getting a little bit easier way of funding things. We're also looking more for investors. We've had investors in the past, and so as we get into bigger and bigger projects, we'll be seeing more and more investors.
So for me, I'm mostly a producer-focused kind of student, and what I really enjoy about being a producer is that I get to help other people make their dreams a reality. Whatever they envision in their story, I'm usually the one to kind of gather what it's necessary to make that film. And on the side of directing, what I love about directing is being able to work with great actors and seeing my vision come to life through them and their performances.
But I will say that for me particularly, it's a lot of like going into the savings, you know, buying props and any equipment that I need for my productions. I've also been blessed with a lot of people that have had their own equipment that have been willing to let me borrow them. Especially when I was first starting off, I had a lot of people, particularly in my crew, that were very willing to let me borrow their cameras because at the time I didn't have one. So I've had that happen where I've been very blessed by the people I've worked with, and I owe a big debt to them because I wouldn't be where I am without that.
I think it's important to the economy of Florida because one of our huge reliance on the economy of Florida is our tourism. Now, what's something that could really boost that? Film sets. You got all these different pieces from big productions that are just left around that people can come visit, they can look at, they can take pictures of. It'll make them want to come here, and they'll associate it with films, big movie stars, big directors. It's just more drive for people to come down here, take a trip, spend money in all the local shops, pick up souvenirs, you know, that type of thing.
There's two sides to that. So the film industry, it's really important to any industry, but it's really important to Florida because we have a state that can capitalize on the films being here, because we have a state that's beautiful to come to. And if you can have a state that's also, like for instance with Bloodlines, people come to the Keys now just to see the sets where those films were made. So you have an opportunity in Florida to do the same thing because people can come visit here all year round to see those sites, and we become a tourist destination on top of a tourist destination. So we already have the infrastructure to support tourism, so if we have films here and people want to come check out where those films were made, we now can have a double tourist industry that's just amazing for capitalizing. Also, it brings in so much money locally for hotels, food, also giving jobs to all of our amazing actors, amazing production companies that are unfortunately leaving. So not having a film industry here, it is killing the local economy because all these companies and all these people, these super talented, educated people, are leaving. They're not buying houses here, they're not buying cars here, they're not buying food here, they're not raising their families here. So we're losing millions of dollars a year with that influx of people leaving to go to other states. And I'm sure those other states are very happy with us, because we have 2 of the top 20 film schools in the United States in Florida, and we train those young, intelligent, amazing, artistic people, and then we ship them to other states to go make high-paying wages and boost their economy instead of ours. So that's kind of a roundabout way to answer all of that.
So a lot of people are not aware, but the film industry is actually really great for a local economy. Let's say a $5 million film comes here to St. Pete, and they have to get hotel rooms for all of their talent, their crew, people that are flying in. That's revenue for the hotels. Those people are also going to eat. So local food restaurants are going to be taking a lot of revenue from that. There's also going to be souvenirs that are going to be bought by these people that are coming in and seeing these beautiful locations. On their days off, they may go to Busch Gardens. Look, Busch Gardens got a little bit more. So bringing these people in from other places to film here in Florida is actually beneficial to so many other industries here. And so if we do more of it, then we can even see a lift in economy, especially in tourism.
To me, I believe the film industry is really important to the economy, because we are within a generation where technology has been, the biggest boom ever, and film's definitely overtaken the world of, tech, internet, all that.
I think the film industry could boost the tourism here, mainly because if you look at other places like LA and New York and all these other places that have high tourism, they all have like a film industry, and it's because people like to see things that were in film or check out studios, and people are like into seeing that type of stuff. And it makes the city look like things are happening in this city. It's the place to be. Come here and check it out. But
this area of Bradenton and Sarasota has been extremely supportive of the film events, not just the productions, because we've partnered with a lot of people who want to have films made either about their issue, if it's nonfiction, or have granted access for settings, production space settings. Local production outlets have given intern opportunities to our students. Obviously it's free labor, but that comes at a price of training for that labor, for that free labor. The local film festivals, Sarasota Film Festival, Cineworld, even going up into Sunscreen Festival, Gasparilla, there are other festivals north of here. Our students have taken part in those. They've submitted some films, and festivals beyond. So that's been very helpful. I'll even say that locally, the cinemas, like Lakewood Ranch Cinema, Burns Court Cinema in particular, have been sites where we've held classes. Sites that have employed our students to be, guest coordinators. I won't say ticket takers or concessionaires, because those are old terms, but they're people that are out there in the front lines learning what makes movies work on people. And the best way to do that is watch a crowd watch a movie. So yeah, I think it's been inordinately friendly in opportunities, if not in grants and scholarships and tax incentives.
I think what Florida should be doing that LA and Atlanta are doing is just promoting their film industries more. So, for example, those specific states give tax incentives to their filmmakers because they understand that it is a huge driving force in their economy. If we look at Atlanta, for example, Atlanta is starting to become way more developed than it's ever been. And that's hugely influenced by the amount of income that's coming from their film industry, because everything's being shot there, so they're flourishing. And I think Florida could really benefit from taking a chance on that.
The correct answer from my point of view to that question, what they're doing right that we're not, is capitalizing their film incentives to get those films to their state to boost their economies, right? So we have basically no film incentive left, and we don't keep funding it, whereas those other states will, and they will keep investing to keep incentivizing those production companies and those talented people to spend that money to come into their state, and we don't do that. We've basically said we're not going to put any more taxpayer money towards it. Taxpayers shouldn't have to incentivize that, and these companies should have to go build their own money from either personal investments or banks to come into your state, whereas Georgia and places like that don't look at it like that. They go, we are going to take this tax money and incentivize those companies to come in to boost our economies locally. So there's a different, it's really a political and governmental difference. It's not really they're not doing anything right or wrong, I wouldn't say. It's just a different perspective.
To me, I feel like what Georgia and LA are doing differently and doing right as compared to Florida is the fact that they're kind of being a little bit more open about their film productions. And it might just be me, but I don't think Florida has been promoting itself as well as the other two places in terms of what kind of production's going on. And, you know, they don't showcase the fact that maybe the specific movie was probably filmed in Florida, but you have places, especially in like LA, you have places where like, oh, this blockbuster movie was filmed in this part of LA, you should come and, you know, film here as well if this is kind of the same kind of project that you're looking forward to do.
Well, you know, it's one of the most challenging aspects because it's always changing. You know, when we teach film production, the techniques change because the technologies change. Film history and critical studies, there just is every year a more intriguing bank of subjects to look at. And that doesn't just include cinema, that includes television and YouTube, all other new media sources today. So it's quite vibrant and ever-changing. So I like it. It's different every day.
It's interesting to teach film. I tend to approach it, strangely enough, as coaching a sports team or teams. Every semester at different levels, there's groups of students with varying abilities. So I'm constantly with my feelers out to gauge an evolving attribute, really. Does the student come in with very little information? Does the student come in with a high level of skill? And how do I mix and match those students when working in group capacities? That seems to be the secret to teaching film, is really dialing into not only the curriculum, but who you have at hand and how to get them from point A to point D. So getting students to dial into their resources and limitations, certainly.
It's tough to teach motivation, but when a student sees a movie or a commercial, it doesn't matter. It's something that says to them, I get it. I think I can do that. Or maybe more importantly, I have something to say. You know, there are movies that teach us how to make movies, that teach us how to. Citizen Kane is the classic example. Once you see that film, and you understand how the collision of images works to create new meaning, meaning short shots hit each other, and now, oh, we have a synthesis. You start to go, I can do this. And you go into an editing room, and you put together two pieces of film or tape or files, and now there's a eureka moment. You know, it happens all the time. You know, in editing, it happens all the time. You know, I'll go back to Orson Welles even. We mentioned Citizen Kane, but he said he just watched Stagecoach, the John Ford film from 1939. Watched that 50 times. He said, that taught me how to make a movie. So it may be oversimplified, but I'll tell you things today, everything from commentary tracks on DVDs to sitting in a classroom and watching or making short films are the keys. That is, when a student sits in that classroom and commits, the motivation's there.
Yeah, I'm a little funny about the term produced, you know. It's not like these people come in without their own set of skills. We definitely help people along the way, provide resources, networking, community involvement, some doorway to activity, if not work experience. So I'd like to think that we kind of maybe help shape some individuals, but I really have to give credit to the individuals. So if those individuals are Damon Shakiri with Evolve Media, he's here in town, he's been here in town, he does fantastic work. David Kuhn, I believe, as a DP, moved out to Texas, Austin, I believe, doing some really good work. Steve Reeves went from here right to Ringling, and to my knowledge, he's out in Los Angeles. Jacob McDuffie is another student that knocked on the door of a post-production facility for a while, and it paid off.
We do have some folks out there. We had two gentlemen who were in classes back in the 90s, late 90s, Mike Lee and Rob McKittrick, are making narrative films, comedies, action films, writing them, directing them in California. Rob Van Alcamade was a documentary film student who went to work with Morgan Spurlock's company after he graduated from here. He did some other things in between. Naida Escueda is a woman who won a fellowship and a large dollar incentive prize to work on screenwriting. And she has a new short film that we just looked at the other day. She came back and showed it to the class as a test screening.
Who else do we have? Adam Roberts had some start here, went off to some decent directing credits. I believe there's some people in New York. But yeah, as opposed to just being freelance or shifting into another line of work, there's definitely some students that use SCF as a launch pad.
Yeah, so we do have some people, and I'm not forgetting all the folks who are working even at a local level. Damon Shakiri, who has Evolve Media, he goes around the world shooting projects. And I know I'm leaving a lot of people out because there are much more than just the 4 or 5 I mentioned. But those are some significant ones that come to mind.
I ask myself that question a lot, and I don't have a good answer because it's stressful and it's tough and it's hard. But I don't know. It's always worth it. Like I think multiple times during a shoot, I'll ask myself, "Why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? This is nuts." But then after it's over, it's like you kind of it just feels right. Like that's why I did it. Everybody's happy and came together. It's almost like going to war. Obviously, it's nowhere near as deadly or threatening, but it's like everybody's in these trenches together, and you're just stressing and yelling at each other. And you can yell at someone on a set that's your best friend, and then as soon as you call wrap, you're best friends again. So, and you're like, I think you come out closer to people afterwards for having gone through it, kind of like war. So they say. So yeah, I don't know. I just love people, like working with people. So that's a huge part of it, and creating something.
It's a tough time in the state of Florida for any arts organizations. The state has decimated the grants that are available to places like the Florida Studio Theater. Local outlets that rely on, it's not a lot of money, but they can apply for up to $150,000 a year. That has now been capped at about $10,000 a year, which means that several programs are going to be, obliterated, and volunteers can't make up the difference. Positions will be, sliced. We saw this coming. Certainly, we saw it coming in education when the arts became underfunded. And STEM, science, technology, engineering, medicine, I think that's our STEM acronym. So many of us in the arts want to put an A in there, so it's STEAM, so the arts become have their presence as well. It's a tough sell to a lot of people, because to many the arts are frivolous. And when we say the arts, and again, I think those of us in digital communication have to also consider us part of the technology, because if you didn't have the new technologies to run the art of film, it would be an expensive throwback and maybe an indulgence. But since everyone today is connected and interconnected through new media devices, it is vital to encourage through art, and that is also another word for communication in my mind, young students to engage. we don't want a future where we only engage in the so-called text, meaning the pixels on a screen that has X number of characters, as in a tweet. You lack nuances, and emojis don't make up for it. All right? To see an image on a screen in a darkened environment with other people, whether that's Black Panther or Call Me By Your Name, is to share a sense of community and involvement and reading of faces and nuances on a screen 40 foot tall that you don't get through a tweet.
In this industry, I don't believe in a whole lot of competition. There's so much work for everybody that I don't feel like anybody should feel that they need to compete with each other. And everybody's story is different. That's the great part about being a filmmaker. I don't feel like if I do a certain story that I'm competing with another filmmaker. I feel like we're both telling these really great stories, and it would be awesome if we can watch both of our films back to back in a film festival. It's a very collaborative thing. We're all supporting each other, working together, and just seeing everybody's stories come to life, seeing their art.
That's one of the hardest things to make. So the hardest part about getting, first off, after you have an amazing script, the second hardest thing is funding. And that's the hardest thing about bringing any film into thing. And how I personally go about funding is I have a network of private investors as well as my own personal money that I put in to make my films a reality. And I think every filmmaker does that, right? You put your own money in, you call people on the phone, you ask family and friends, you do whatever it takes to get the budget to make that happen.
The fact that we're being commandeered by small devices with little letters that are supposed to make us more democratized is a fallacy. You know, we become empathetic to other people by seeing their stories, not by reading opinions about their stories from people who didn't live them. So going to the movies for me has always been therapeutic. And for students who make films, it's therapeutic. You get it out. If it's a story you have to tell or a truth you have to reveal in documentary, do it. And you need pictures, and you need sounds, and yes, you do need some text. But it's one of the biggest challenges now compared to when I started was how the impetus to pull the new media to you, meaning you with your earbuds and your text in front of you, not you, but you know what I mean, and not be able to look at the person to the left and right and the shared experience, and then when it's over you go, what did you think? How do you feel? We don't do that when we're only looking down. You're supposed to be looking up. You know, Stephen Hawkins, said advice to his kids was always look up. Always look up. Instead of, and I don't think he meant, I think he meant look at the stars as opposed to looking down. And a lot of people look down these days, and there probably is going to be a price to pay somewhere. I don't want to be the voice of doom, but I think looking down is disadvantageous to our culture.
If the concern is how a college like SCF might overlap or be redundant with a college like Ringling, I feel like with some of the resources and approach to filmmaking that Ringling has, and they're wonderful, we have our own niche. We tend to accept students not with more open arms, but just in general, we're a little more universal as to who we bring to the table. They're not necessarily art students. So I feel like Ringling has their niche as a quite professional model, where SCF, we have our niche as well as a doorway, a little more grooming, a little more adjusting students to the temperature of the water, so to speak, and they may leap to Ringling. I don't feel like we do things that Ringling does, and they do things that we do. We may cross over in some spaces, but I think we occupy our own space very well in terms of being complementary to the community.
Sometimes it's a challenge to keep courses at the community college level, the 2-year college level, because we're under certain restrictions from the state. Obviously, we are not in competition with the 4-year schools. We can be a breeding ground for students who want to jump to 4-year programs, either at institutions like Ringling or USF, FSU. And that's the best thing that we can do here, is give people a good foundation, a good affordable foundation. The classes that they take in their media track will transfer, and then they'll have upper level challenges at other institutions. I will add to that, though, that this college has allowed us to do courses in what would be deemed special topics. And so when we have a special topics class, we are allowed to customize for a select group of students. Let's say somebody wants to have an advanced course in screenwriting, and we've got 10 students who want to do that. We can put that together under special topics and teach it. We wouldn't be teaching motion picture writing 2, because we're only allowed to be teaching motion picture writing 1. However, if there are enough students interested and as a special topics, we can get it on as a one-off. Same thing with certain production techniques. We taught a class one semester on using the iPhone as a camera. It's not a regular course, but it could qualify as a special topics. So there's some leeway, and we're fortunate to have that.
In terms of film production, the intimacy, the closeness, in terms of being able to speak to students as names, as people. I get to know people. It's not as if I have such a high number of students that they're numbers, that I don't really know who they are, you know? And I find that there are some large schools where that's lost in the process. Now, we don't have Dodge behind us as as money, sponsorship. So one of the limitations would be resources, people in terms of how many instructors we can bring to the table to teach. Because if I wanted Catherine Bigelow to come in and teach an advanced production class, what would I pay her?
If I didn't have Chris here, I don't know if we'd have a department. We would have a critical studies department where we would look at film and write about film and maybe write screenplays, but I dare say it would be difficult to continue the production arm. I used to do both, and when the program was much smaller, run the technical aspects as well as the critical studies. But Chris has stepped up to the plate and has been instrumental. If there was anything that I could ask for, it would be another full-time instructor. We have a significant amount of part-time instructors, adjuncts, but if you do any research, as I'm sure you have, in the game of education and teaching, colleges are primarily setting their instructional staff to part-time these days.
So keeping a 2-year program here hasn't been that big a deal. Now, if I wanted to build a 6,000 square foot soundstage here, there might be a little bit more competition. I don't see that happening. But I wouldn't look at it that way. I would probably say Ringling.
Florida used to be third behind LA and New York. I would love to see that happen again. I think it would happen again, but I do think it's going to take a while, probably within the next 10 years or so, if we're starting to focus a little bit more on bringing Florida more and more projects. There's companies like Digital Caviar that are doing that. Tony Armour is doing a great job going all over the world seeking people to come film here. If we continue to do that within all of our counties of the entire state, then I think that we can start building more and more interest in, oh, the film industry is actually going to help our whole state's economy. Maybe we should start thinking about these incentives like Georgia does.
I absolutely think that Florida will make a comeback to being one of the top film states. Simply because recent productions that have successfully been shot here on a low budget, such as Moonlight, and then you got the Florida Project. These are all doing very well in festivals. Moonlight won an Oscar. It's doing phenomenal. So it's proof that we can make films here. Then you also have things like Ringling's new soundstage, which is bringing Hollywood directors like Kevin Smith, Ethan Hawke here to shoot their own little individual projects. Ethan Hawke's, for example, is doing very well in festivals. So I think that's the proof that we need that film can do successful here, and I think it's going to just push the envelope a little more and kind of influence people to really give it more of a shot. So I think within the next 5 years, we're going to see a pretty big change in film.
You know, I honestly think that there is a possibility that Florida could have a comeback, mainly because there's so many good, talented people that I network with and associate with that are in Florida that are making super quality work, that I feel like them alone would bring in some kind of interest, but it would also fall on the tax incentives.
Definitely Florida will make a comeback, and from what I've heard, it's mostly because of the changes in the tax incentive, but I don't really know the details of that. But if Florida were to make a comeback, I would assume it would be any sort of changes to that. But even the fact that, you know, we have people like Kevin Smith, and I worked on a project with Justin Long, even just having them here kind of makes other people figure that, oh, if these big name people would come to Florida to make their film, maybe I should do the same, and my stuff will be just as good as what they make.